If I start coughing, you'll understand. Take a little sip of water. You know, it is hard for seniors in the winter. It's actually hard for most of us. I'm going to talk for a minute about seasonal affective disorder because I think that's pretty important. Lots of folks have it. Lots of folks don't know they have it. Lots of folks just feel like they're miserable in the wintertime. And they're not really sure why. And seasonal affective disorder is one of the, it sounds just terrible, but it's actually one of those things that all of us feel just a smidgen of. But if it rolls over into symptoms that I'm going to talk to you about, then you should be concerned. But seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that's related to the seasons. And what happens is when the days get shorter, when we have more darkness, when there's more rain, when there's more clouds, when there's more snow, folks have a tendency, if they have seasonal affective disorder, to get pretty depressed. And so just so you can know how critical this is, I'm not just going to talk about depression, just a normal depression. This can actually turn into something that's frightening. People can actually have suicidal ideation or thoughts of suicide relative to something that they're really not even understanding. The people who are most susceptible to it are people who have a depression diagnosis or a bipolar diagnosis. Those are usually the top two. How you get seasonal affective disorder is something that really nobody knows. If you start reading all the information about it, the research will tell you a couple of things. Sometimes it's familial based. In other words, if you have someone in your family who's gone through it, and some of you probably have, if you think back and you think, remember, Uncle Bob who got depressed, and it seemed like he only got depressed in the winter, and it seemed like it was pretty bad. And in the summer, he was better, and we never knew what that meant. Well, it probably meant that Uncle Bob had seasonal affective disorder. So it can be a familial thing. It can also be something that happens just because you have the propensity to be depressed. You just are one of those folks who carries around some sadness and depression. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that thing. But I want to tell you the symptoms of it so that you can know. Some of you in here probably haven't. I will tell you, I'm just right on the edge. I know what will help you 100% of the time. And some of you might remember this years ago when we had lots of shopping malls. We don't have as many as we used to. A lot of times people would walk in the early mornings in the shopping malls. They put on some comfortable, running shoes or tennis shoes or whatever, and they would walk the perimeter of it. Sometimes they did it because of the lighting. People who have seasonal affective disorder need some light, even if it is man-produced light, even if it's not the sunlight. Sunlight's 100% better. We're going to talk about that. But it could be they just need light, period. So I have a tendency when it's dark to keep on lights. Now, I do what every expert says to do relative to sleep. I sleep in a dark, cool room. But when I get up, I want there to be light. So one thing that people do to help with seasonal affective disorder is to have light. Okay. So here are the symptoms. If you have any of these symptoms, it doesn't mean that you have seasonal affective disorder. It just means that you could, but it does mean that you're kind of right there on the edge. Okay, it's winter time. You with me? Listlessness, feelings of loss of energy, losing interest in some things that you once liked to do or enjoyed doing, carbohydrate craving. Come on. Don't we all crave carbohydrates? But when folks have seasonal affective disorder, think about in the wintertime. How many times in the wintertime do you seriously crave a lot of carbohydrates? It's just different, and you're not getting as much exercise, right? So then what happens? That you gain weight. Okay, is a problem here. Difficulty concentrating, hopelessness, worthlessness, feeling guilty, and then suicidal ideation. Okay, so let's talk about, is there anything you can do about it? And there are some things that you can do about it. One is to get lucky, but the other is, if this is you that I'm talking about, go ahead and plan to get some help for it. Talking therapy is helpful. Medication can be helpful. But if you're going to get medication for it, make sure you've told your provider exactly what's going on with you, so that you walk in there with some symptoms, so that he or she is able to say, yeah, I think this might work for you. And the reason I'm vague about this is because it's not always antidepressants. It's sometimes it's anti-anxiety. It's sometimes just taking the edge off. Okay. Now I'm going into the talk, because this is what I was supposed to talk on, but I just thought we could. But I'm not going long because I'm afraid this thing will start flashing at me. Will it? It's still not blue, so okay. It's okay. Everything's okay. Just, you're not gonna hand me a cigarette. Just want to make sure.
I love the conscious.
I think what happens when someone's older, and so many of you work with older adults, this is important to know. Even if they don't have seasonal affective disorder, things happen to older adults during the different seasons. I will tell you, I didn't tell you this part, but there is seasonal affective disorder that starts in the summer and ends in the winter. It's just not as many people have that. Okay. There are some people who have that. They do better. Have you ever met somebody? It was a cloudy day. It was horrible, a little terrible, and they were like, "How you doing?" Like, good. We like today. Well, they may have a little reversal there, but one of the things that happens is in the winter it gets cold, and I always tell the story because it makes me laugh so hard. If Donna Roach were here, she would tell the story. I went to Hearthside one day, and the air was out, and it was like July, and I walked in and went, "Whoa!" And the residents are just walking around. They just talking to each other. Some of them are having a little lunch. I'm like, who could eat? It's hot. I told Donna, what happened? She goes, they're working on it. It's coming back on. And I said, well, the residents don't seem to be bothered about it. She goes, no, they love it because they're warm. They get cold in the winter. It's very different. Our bodies are so different as we age, as all of us know. So be aware of that. If you're working with somebody older, if they're dressing in layers, they're probably cold. And just know that they need some elevated heat during the winter times. The other thing is, when it's the winter, we get snow, we get rain, we get precipitous conditions that will sort of stand in the way of getting out and driving and doing those things that we used to do. Now we do it because we have to, because we work. So we don't get in the car and hope we don't slide into anybody. But the deal is, somebody older who's not working is not going to do that. They're also going to be very afraid to go outside, because what happens when you go outside and it's rainy and you're older? You could slip and fall. And then what happens? You break something. And then what happens? Life changes its course, doesn't it? So in a good way, they are fearful. Okay, so that stops. The other thing is, because older people have a tendency to isolate when it gets like this, they get depressed because they're not seeing anybody. They're not going anywhere. They used to go to the store every Monday morning to get groceries. They're not doing that anymore. It's good to know this because it makes a difference in how they're feeling. and what you need to do to help them. We're gonna talk about that in just a minute. I'm gonna do it. Good, good. I love you. When you are by yourself, and I want you to think about your own self for a minute. Ever been like you didn't feel good or something, or you were by yourself for a while? And that's a good example. You're sick. You don't feel well. Everybody's sort of leaving you alone, and you're with your own thoughts. What happens?
Good luck.
You get sicker, right? You do, because you're thinking about it. I mean, don't we all? Don't you get sicker in the middle of the night than you do in the morning? I mean, I was smoking cigarettes. I mean, everything changes. So consequently, older people have a tendency to isolate. That's why we love all these folks in here, Donna, Sherry, Tabitha, all the folks, I'm probably missing folks who have assisted livings and memory cares and things like that, because you have a ready-made audience and ready-made communicators, and it really saves lives. But everybody doesn't have that. Sometimes people are at home. And you know what? And we'll talk about this in a minute, but sometimes nobody checks on them. Sometimes they're just there, thinking about how they're sick, thinking about how they can't get out, thinking about how they can't do the activities that they once did, wondering if anybody cares about them. So how do you fight back on that? Well, if you're fighting for yourself, just tell yourself, I may feel a little bit down right now, but if it's not too bad, I can probably weather it until the summer comes. Okay? Being alone. But how can you help those who can't help themselves? And Tabitha and Sherry, this is even for you guys as you're working with seniors, and Ben as you're working with seniors. Don't assume that someone doesn't need anything, because we have a bad tendency to ask people, what you need? You need anything from me? Now, when people ask that, what do you say?
I'm good.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. It'll be fine. And remember that older people are sometimes a little more, well, they're less self-centered than we are. They're a little bit but not as self-absorbed as we are. So they're not gonna wanna put you out. I can remember my mother using those exact words, I just don't wanna put anybody out. So my mother could have been on the floor, literally, and unless we found her, she wasn't gonna tell us. She didn't wanna put anybody out, but she actually needed us to do those things, and it was not a putting out. But if we ask her, she's going to say no. So what you do is, if you know somebody older or in your communities, you just see something, you just go ahead and do it. You just remember that they may not ask, and they may not ask you, and they may never ask you. So you've got to just go ahead and do it for them. The other thing is, nobody does well alone. Really. Maybe half of percent of the population does well alone. The rest of us need somebody, even if it is a phone call, even if it is, and y'all, this is such a little thing, but it is a huge thing, even if it is a card. Let me tell you the power of words on a card. I was helping this woman who was a hoarder, and I'm sure you see that a lot. She was a hoarder, and she was also giving away her money. And so the facility called me and asked me if I would speak with her. And so I did. I went in and said, how are you? I went in as I walked, as I pushed magazines, and it was incredible. And she said, well, I'm good. And I said, well, you have a lot of stuff here. And she said, yes, I do. I said, stuff can feel pretty important, can't it? And she said, yeah, it is. And I said, well, let's talk about some things. And she said, okay. I said, I know that you have a lot of friends, knowing that she did not. And she said, well, I don't have many friends, but the friends I have are very important to me. I said, okay, can you share with me a friend? And she pulled out these letters that all started, they were all, generated. It started out, dear friend, dear friend, we need your help. Dear friend, you've always been available to help us. I'm going through millions of these, and I know that she is giving tons and tons of money to these friends. Words are important to somebody who's lonely and older. Not only do they get scammed, but they lose sight of who they are because they're nothing without their friends. Isn't that sad? Just understand that in the wintertime, when things hit, when there's nothing else to do, those kinds of things become very important. Somebody asking for money on the television set becomes very important. And many of these causes are worthy, but y'all, not to someone who doesn't have any money. They're giving away every bit of what's in their bank account because they're lonely. I just want you to see that one of the things we have to do is just be aware that things happen when folks are isolated. Okay. The other thing is, folks don't eat well. So we have to watch folks and their appetites. Remember, we've already said with seasonal affective disorder, sometimes the appetite and the sleep patterns are affected. It becomes incredibly important that people are eating nourishing foods. If you know somebody who's older and they can't get to nourishing foods, there are a lot of people now who live in food deserts, and we know that. Help them get some food. Take them some soup. If they're in a facility, just make sure they're eating. Because I will tell you, sometimes folks don't eat and we forget. We just say, well, they're a little older, they're a little picky, or they don't like eggs. Well, if they don't like eggs, why do we keep giving them eggs? I always said that, the psych part, I always say that to our people. Our people aren't eating. Well, she doesn't like eggs. Well, what does she like? Well, we don't know, but she won't eat eggs. Well, ask her what she likes. We can get that. Look, if all she likes is a muffin, get her a muffin. Something is better than nothing. Here's the other thing. Older people have a tendency not to take their medicines. They're in a facility, we sort of help them do that. But if they're not, sometimes they're just not getting it. Can you imagine somebody who's already a little bit depressed because of everything that's around them, and all of a sudden they don't take their medicines? There could be a problem. I think one of the most important things, and I know this is true for me, I always have to make sure I'm sleeping well, I'm resting well. And if I know that I've had a night, like last night when I didn't sleep so well, guess what? Tonight, I go to bed earlier. It's just a smart thing to do. Now, I don't like getting older. I don't like what it brings, but I can tell in my own body that there are changes, and I have to listen to those. The things that I can eat. I like hot food. I don't mean flaming hot. I mean chili hot. I could be in one of those hot wing eating contests. Yeah. Because I love that stuff. Here's the deal. Starting a couple of years ago, my body decided it didn't like that stuff anymore. So I have two choices. I can continue to eat them, knowing that I'm going to pay for it, or I can say, I have to limit. Okay. When you're by yourself, it's hard to do that. And older people have a tendency not to set realistic boundaries for themselves. We're older, we forget. Our brain doesn't work in that direction anymore. We're not out in the world every day planning. We don't have a calendar. That part is important. And then I think, and I'm gonna close up here. I think if you can just make sure, if somebody's older, whether they're in a community or whether they're on their own or whether it's you, go to the doctor when you have a doctor's appointment. Don't take yourself off your medicines. Don't just say, I don't want this anymore. I don't think I need this anymore. Because your body is used to it. And whether it needs it or not is up to you and your provider. But ultimately, you got to make sure that you're taking what you're supposed to, because that's very dangerous. Okay. I got a couple of minutes here, so I'm just gonna close and then I'll open it up to questions by saying whether you were the person that I'm talking about or whether you knew the person I'm talking about. Pay attention. Pay attention if somebody's different from how they usually are. That can just be your friend. I don't know. But paying attention, especially to somebody older, is the difference for them between living their good life and losing their best life. Okay, what kind of questions do you have for me? You can ask me about anything. Film me.
Well,
Troy.
I was reading a science magazine recently, and they're talking about people that are single, as you're saying here, lonely and isolated, and the importance of having a pet. Do you have a particular comment on that you'd like
No.
to share?
Yes, I think that, thank you, Troy. I think that's awesome. I think older people do great with pets, and I think they also in facilities do great with pet therapy. And the reason is because this little ball of fur is not judgmental. And they feel that. Because remember, as you get older, a lot of times you also get scared or that you're losing things about yourself and that people will judge you. These little balls of fur also can sort of creep into your heart and take the place of love because there may not be another love out there. There may not be, I talk to children of senior adults who are struggling with depression. And that's one of the things I say is if they ever had a pet. Now, in doing that, you have to be careful. You have to make sure they take care of the pet. You have to make sure it's something that's not going to get under their feet and trip them. This doesn't become a fall hazard. There are things to do, but yes, pets are wonderful.
How does
Yes.
this time of year affect like caregivers, because they're giving a lot beyond?
How does it affect them?
Yeah, well, because, I mean, a lot of times caregivers are, maybe caring for their family, plus working, plus.
That's a great question. Caregivers, whether they're in a facility or whether they're actually caring for their parents, aunts, uncles, somebody older, in a caregiver role, you will find yourself losing yourself. And sometimes it's just because you're tired. Sometimes it's just because, Amelia, you know this with your dad and dealing with those issues when your dad was alive. It can become daunting to be a caregiver, even if you love the person you're giving care to. So you don't have to give yourself false statements about yourself, like you shouldn't have to do this or whatever. When you're caregiving for somebody, you just know that you have to give care to yourself as well. And sometimes first, because your reservoir has to be full and your reservoir is leaking when you're caregiving. And sometimes, even in our own businesses, we do that caregiving vicariously. And it's, yeah. So I think in answer to your question, caregivers should always be aware of their own vulnerabilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything
Around
else?
time. I think that's it. Any other questions?
That's a hard study.
I'm sorry,
Caregiver being aware of their.
limitations. Yeah, it's
Well,
hard.
thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, so we got green screen afterwards, a chance to band fan, so